the church, Sunday school teachers. I went to the church, actually, in the church parking lot was where I rolled my papers and threw my paper out. So off of Bowie Avenue in Houston was
Let's talk about that for a second. So the truck would draw up and the papers would be heaved out the back. And then what happened?
Well, the route manager, which I can still remember, my route was F2. The route manager, who was a wonderful, again, a great man, meant a lot to me, who followed my football career. But he would throw, you're right, they're bundles of 100 papers. He would drive from downtown out to the East End, and he would throw those papers off with the number of papers that you got. There's a bundle of 100, and then however many more papers you got to throw. So Mr. Lofgren would throw those papers off. He was very punctual, a great man. And we would take the papers. You learned you had a string, a big roll of string, and you would put that string in your mouth. You would moisten it with your saliva, and you would take and you would pop that saliva covered string onto the paper, and then you wrapped it up quickly and pulled it, broke the string. Then you went to the next one, and you got to be quite proficient. I'd say my hand skills were developed by that, and by throwing the paper, which again, it was, as you would expect, a rolled up paper, and I would throw it. You would put those in bags on a bicycle. And I have a picture of that too, by the way. But you had them loaded onto those racks on your bicycle. And there's a certain way you stacked them in to get the most number of papers. To get, say, 150 papers onto a bicycle rack you had to pack them in the right way. But we would then ride off and go down the neighborhood, and I took great pride in how I threw those papers, because if you threw it just right, it would land on its end and it would hop up to the porch. And I love to not just throw it anywhere, but if I could walk it up to their steps, that was the best way. I was a good paper boy. So it taught me.
Let me ask, do you think that that skill set was useful later in life for you?
It was really, as a passer in football, and then doing lab work and dentistry, and certainly doing surgery, was all, again, these hand skill and having a sense about how you do things in the most efficient manner and quality manner too, by the way. Everything to me had to do with doing it the best possible way, and then learning from other people who came before me. My older brother, I just followed him. He had a paper route before I did, so I learned from him and from other paper boys as well. But I think those skills go back to, again, if I said before that was pulling the weeds, I was a weeder in the mouth with teeth later on in life in my professional career. But I think all of those skills and some pride in how you do things the right way, the best possible way, find a way to get it done, to get the job done. I didn't miss anybody. Just in your head, a memory, it helped with the brain. You had to know who your customers were. You didn't want to miss a house. Sometimes, again, we threw the route for each other. The rare time we had the flu, we had to throw a brother's route. So we had the addresses down, and you just read them And pretty soon I knew my two brothers' routes and my route. So, but again, it goes back to, again, right across the street from the church. And I will tell you this, on Sunday morning was the big Sunday papers. And I'll digress just a bit, but on Saturdays, this goes back to growing up at home, these three boys at home, we need to get our parents a little bit of private time. So how did they get rid of us for a Saturday morning? So we went to the theater and watched Gene Autry, Hopalong Cassidy. I remember his horse was named Topper. Today, if you want to go back through and remember going to the Saturday matinees at theaters, that was your entertainment in those days. So on Saturday morning, my parents would each give us 2 dimes, 2 silver dimes, and it was 10 cents for Red Hots and 9 cents for the theater. So those are 2 figures I never forget, but 2 dimes was all we needed for entertainment for the week. And then
let me ask you about money on your paper route. Was there money involved that you had to keep track of?
There was. Thank you for that. That taught me some good business skills, as well as the Houston Chronicle was $1.50 a month, and you had to collect that at the end of each month and pay your bill for the papers, which was really $1 of the $1.50. I got 50 cents. So I made a little over $50 a month. My father, again, being a disciplined man, set me up. We went to the bank, Harrisburg Bank, and set up a savings account. I wish to this day I still had my little passbook, because every month I put $50 into my savings account. I think I still have that money today, that I feel like I've never spent that $50 a month. So my dad would give me, again, $5 on an occasion, a rare occasion, really 2 occasions. One $5 was for the first date. He let me take the car and gave me a $5 bill for a date. And I forget what the other $5 was for, but $50 was for the paper route. And again, I say I've invested that money over the years. So that's been probably something a little less than 70 years that money has been invested, and that has grown to, very frankly, to a lot of money. And I credit that to throwing a paper route and learning to, again, be responsible, to have the skills and even the physical structure to pedal that bike. And I'll just tell you, one Sunday morning, it had rained, it had poured rain, and you put the paper into a plastic bag. Well, that made it difficult. We had to make 2 trips with the larger Sunday papers to throw all the papers. Well, I was going down the street, and lo and behold, a street was flooded. And I'm pedaling along, and suddenly I get into deeper water, and the pedals are going in. It was above pedal height. And I was going slower and slower, and the weight of those racks on the back, if you go too slow, it's going to go over. So sure enough, there I go over. The papers go floating off in the water. I had to get them back, but I got the job done, and ended up getting all the papers. And by being in bags, the papers didn't get wet. So I still completed the task. But that was, again, it taught me business, and you had to pay your bill and make a profit and then save that money. And it was always to spend less. I know I spent a few bucks on a date or for gas for the car, but for the most part, it was $50 a month to put into my savings account. Oh, again, I wish I had my book.
Let me ask you if you paid for things in cash or did you have credit? And also, well, just speak to that for a moment.
It was cash. There was no checking. It was one account. It was saving, and you kept whatever cash you needed. It was all there were no checks. I never, in fact, I don't even remember when I guess it was when I went into well, I don't know. It was later on into my mid-20s before I ever had a checking account or a car, by the way. I didn't get a car until I graduated from dental school and drove from Houston to Camp Pendleton, California in the first car I ever owned. I will tell you, I can remember people ask, what's the cheapest gas you can remember? And I can remember in Central Texas driving out, I think it was near Brownwood, Texas, I believe there was a gas war going on. It was 9 cents a gallon. So I made it to California with very cheap gas. And that was the first car I ever owned was a 64 Chevrolet was the first car I ever owned. And I had that through my years in the Navy Dental Corps and drove it back with a new little baby girl, my first daughter, born in Oceanside, or really Oceanside, California, at Tri-City Hospital, and drove back with a little baby girl to Dallas to specialize at Baylor's College of Dentistry in Dallas before I then came back to Houston.
Were there seatbelts in those cars?
Oh, no seatbelts.
How about a radio? Did you have a radio?
Oh,
that was an optional extra, I bet.
You know, I never remember listening to the radio. I feel sure there was a radio, but I wasn't into music, and I don't remember the radio in the car. Maybe there wasn't. My memory is that part is gone. Those brain cells are gone that relate to driving and having.
Well, it's not too critical. It's not too critical today.
It wasn't in those.
So we covered the first car. How about other major purchases in your life that came along and lead us down the road of your schooling?
Major purchases were few and far between. I think at least growing up, where parents gave us 2 shirts and 2 pair of jeans, and we never owned a suit in our family, and that's a story in itself. That growing up, because my dad was able to, provide for the family, but it was nothing more. We didn't go. We got those 2 dimes. That's all I remember, and otherwise we got clothes. My mother worked part-time at Sears, and instead of, this is a great story, but instead of bringing money home, my mother would bring home blue jeans, T-shirts, little boys' underwear, socks, and shoes, all from Sears. So one time we went to pick my mother up at the store, and I noticed a armored car or armored truck pulled up to Sears. They took the cash money out of the truck, took it into the store. They paid all of their employees who were fathers and working mothers. They went to a counter. They paid them in cash. Sears gave them a discount, so they would then take the cash, walk over to the next station, and pay their bill at Sears. So one time my father got so frustrated, he told my mother, "You never bring any money home." Well, no, she brought home blue jeans and socks and pants and T-shirts.
there's an old song called "I Owe My Soul to the Company Store," and that's how that would occur. That in
Yes.
fact you would never end up with any money because you were buying material from your employer all the time, and somehow you always used up your salary in physical items that you bought.
Yes. Well, I thought Sears was a smart company in that that armored car stayed there. They got all the cash back after all these employees paid their bill. So they put the money back in the armored car or truck and drove it back to the bank. So they were never without money for more than a few hours. So what a smart way to do business.
Very interesting. And they were quite the company. A lot of people wouldn't know them for their stores, but for their catalogs. They were the sort of the Amazon of the day, were they not? That you
They
could
were.
get anything you wanted and you could get it delivered to your door.
Yes. In fact, I read the story of Sears and Roebuck when Sears was in, and this ties in, I always tie it in, but my father was born in Elgin, Texas. And Elgin or Elgin, the Elgin, well, I always said Elgin, but I think from Scotland it was pronounced Elgin, and instead of Elgyn was the Scot way of spelling it. But in in Elgin, Illinois, Sears was at the train station, and they left a box of watches. Nobody claimed them, and Sears sold these watches. I think for like 50 cents a piece. People started. So he was at the train station, and there would be boxes of material left over. He would sell them. So people started coming to him, and then he developed the catalog, the Sears catalog. And yes, I mean, that's a story in itself. But again, Elgin, Illinois was where Sears started. And then my father was born at the, again, the train depot was in Elgin, Texas. And that's where my father was born. So that story ties in to Sears. And then Roebuck was his accountant, was his partner. So I have those stories that can be boring, but that still ties into my father's place he was born, and a good story about Sears as well. And yes, the Sears catalog, that's just a wonderful bit of history.
And we're still in a little bit of the catalog era today because being confined to your home in a pandemic, you did your shopping remotely, and the catalogs will come through to your mailbox even in 2021. Not the giant catalog, the one size fits all that comes through your phone or your computer when you're shopping on Amazon.
Well, I will tell you, we were talking about it, the clothes too, that we, in the family and growing up into the teenage years, we would have football, baseball banquets at the end of the year. And we had, with my father and three brothers, or two brothers, so three boys, four guys in the family, we went to the cheapest place. It was called Robert Hall. And it was embarrassing for anyone to know you got your clothes at Robert Hall. It was the cheapest place. But we bought a sport coat, a one color sport coat. And we each wore that coat to any particular event. So we could never go, my father could never go to a football banquet with us. Today they don't wear coats, but at that time to go to a banquet, you wore a coat. So each of us got to wear the coat to our particular banquet. Our father never went with us. Maybe that's why we never went out to eat, but at
Didn't
least
have enough. You didn't have enough coats to go around.
we didn't. We had the one family coat. And then that carries me forward to when I left to go to the University of Texas. The first thing I did when I got to Austin, Texas was to go to Congress Avenue. Right past, I would walk from the dormitory. I went to Congress Avenue to a clothing store there, and I bought my first suit of clothes to be able to wear while I was in college. I left the one coat at home, and that's one of the first things I did. And I met a fella in talking about people who really impacted my life were, again, up through the Sunday school teachers, the wonderful teachers in elementary, junior, and senior high, coaches who were good people. So lucky to have them, and the mothers who were really the teachers and the math teachers. And I always loved learning, and I was able to do well. I could take tests. But I want to say this too. I believe I was considered the smart when you get this label on your forehead, you're smart or not smart. And I was labeled smart. And as it's turned out, I could take a test. I was a good guesser at the right answer. In being a quarterback or a linebacker, I could guess where to go with the ball, where the ball was going to go. But when it comes down to life, I've learned that problem solving and being able to do things to produce something is the real skill you need, not to take a test. So later on, I felt like my two brothers, I can't convince them of this, that they were both at this point smarter than I am, and they both protected me and taught me. So I see people today I went to school with who've done wonderful things, but they still think of me as the smart guy. I'll tell you, I went to college on an on a academic Jones scholarship. Houston Endowment was Jesse Jones's foundation, and I was able to get a good, fully funded scholarship. So education cost me really literally nothing. I lived on 25 cents a day when I was in college. So it was easy to do. I was able to continue to save money and never spent the money that I had earned. And so I even went through dental school and graduated with money in a savings account. And that's been a kind of a hallmark of my life. In college, by the way, I met Darrell Royal, and sometimes, again, this is talking a lot about me and my family, but I was the top scholastic athlete in Houston in 1958. And Darrell Royal picked up on that. When I got to Austin, I met him, and the coach of the freshman football team, I just remember his name was Schultz. And he actually introduced me to Darrell Royal. Darrell Royal was a smart man. He was a good man. He was a young man. And he wanted me to room with Scott Appleton, who was a lineman from Brady, Texas. So my second year, I roomed with Scott Appleton. I helped him with his coursework. He was just this country boy. He took me to Brady, Texas, and took me deer hunting, and I had never been to the country. I was a city boy. So I learned a lot from him, and he ended up getting the Outland Trophy. And I was only at Texas for 2 years, but the last 2 years, the University of Texas never lost a football game, and they won the national championship. Scott Appleton was the Outland Trophy winner as the top lineman in the country. He remained my friend. After dental school, I went into the Navy Dental Corps. I was stationed at Camp Pendleton with the Marines. And then the second year, I went aboard a Navy ship, USS Prairie AD-15, out of San Diego. Scott Appleton was traded. He was drafted by the Houston Oilers. Then he was traded to the San Diego Chargers. And while I was in San Diego, I went to the football games, would see him there. Years later, I had a little farm in Leona, Texas. Scott Appleton came through to give his testimony about his Christian faith. And I met him again, and I said, Scott, he had an alcohol problem that destroyed his heart, and he died young, needing a heart transplant. But I said, Scott, do you remember me? And he said, yes, you were the smart one. So that academics has gone through my life just because I could take a test. It didn't mean I was smart. It meant I could take a test. So
I think you're describing the difference between academics and maybe worldly intelligence or worldly, capability.
I always thought I could see the big picture, but I could also see the details, the little things that make all the difference. And there's so little difference in any of us. And I do know how the brain operates, and we use such a small percentage of it. We got plenty of backup to go with, just like we do with our computers. So
It's a choice whether you're using a lot of the capacity or not.
yes, yes. So I began, again, fortunate to make the point of the people in my life, from the route manager in throwing the Chronicle, Houston Chronicle, to the neighbors whose yards I took care of, to going to meet Darrell Royal. By the way, Darrell Royal introduced me to Bob Hope, who is doing a program at Gregory Gymnasium. Darrell Royal's office was up on the second floor of the gymnasium, and we were just walking through, and Bob Hope was rehearsing his program. We walked through. Well, he knew who Darrell Royal was, and so he called him over. Darrell Royal took me over, and I met Bob Hope there at Gregory Gymnasium, and that had to be in 1959 or 60, there in at the University of Texas.
Okay. I believe that that's still there, and I got my COVID shot in that same gymnasium.
Isn't that a small world? It is a small world. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what was Bob Hope like? How did he strike you?
The nicest man, just again, so friendly. And again, it's like Darrell Royal was his good buddy. And he was just such a natural with people. I mean, he was a funny guy, he could just handle himself. But, people are usually, I always like to ask, how tall is someone? We put people as larger than life. So Bob Hope was just regular height, and but just a nice, natural, regular guy. And Darrell Royal, again, was the same way, very frankly. He was a young man at that time. He got to Austin in 1956 or 57. I think he got there in 56. So he was a young coach at that time. So, and Bob Hope was, again, much younger too. So
it's interesting you said Bob Hope was he was practicing. He was, for his show. He was famous for having rooms and rooms of jokes, what appeared to be spontaneous and was actually studied very carefully.
Yes, yes. Well, again, he had done his homework, but it was just really neat how just natural that was, the conversation between the two of them. But I had to think back on that. We were busy at that time. I'm going, wow, because I didn't go to the actual show. I can't recall if what I did, but once again, that was before I had a car, and but again, it was just wherever I've been, I've on the team was with Scott Appleton was the All-American and really quite a country boy. And then Darrell Royal was such, again, a good country boy from Oklahoma and a nice guy to know.
He certainly became very famous as we look back at football.
Yes, I mean, Royal Memorial Stadium and the picture there on the side of the stadium where we would always walk past, where Darrell Royal was there with a center. By the way, I had a picture in my surgical suite at my office. I had a picture of a UT halfback, Jim Bertelson, was a great halfback at Texas, and artist, Polsky Morgan, there in Austin, painted pictures. And a patient of mine knew that I played football there, and she brought a painting of this halfback at University of Texas. She gave me a framed picture, and I put that up in my surgical suite. Patients would always say, "That's you." I'd say, "No, that was an All-American, great halfback. I wasn't quite that football player. I sat on the bench and helped the football players, but I was more of an academic than a football player." They said, "Oh, I know that, but that is you." I got to where people say, "That's you." And I go, "Yes, that's a picture of me." Because it made them, I think, feel more confident that some great football player was doing surgery on them. So I did it not to be false about it, but that they wanted that to be me. So I said, "Okay, that was me." So I had to ask forgiveness, but I told all of my friends, and to this day, I tell you, I admit that I used that, but it was in the patient's best interest. It made them calmer. They felt better. It was like pre-medication for them. I don't know that
Yeah,
I told that story enough times.
that is well known in medicine, that if the patient has faith in the physician,
Yes.
that you have a better outcome.
When you say that, the best surgeon, that again, being so fortunate, is Denton Cooley was a good friend. His father was a dentist. Michael Dell's father is a dentist. Dell Computer, Dell Medical School. Michael Dell his father was Alex Dell, an orthodontist here in Houston, who's also a friend. But Dr. Cooley was going to go to dental school, but the basketball coach at the University of Texas, they won the Southwest Conference, and he was a great basketball player. Denton Cooley was a tall man, great athlete. I mean, an unbelievable surgeon. But this is just one of the people who influenced me. And I went over when I was in dental school to watch this surgeon, and I thought we went up to his office overlooking the surgery suite, and I would watch him do surgery. And one day he caught us there, and I said, "Oh, we're in trouble. We're where we shouldn't be." And he said, "Well, who are y'all?" And I said, "Well, we're dental students." Well, he didn't say his father was a dentist. He said, "Well, good." He said, "I want to tell you what I'm doing." And he explained the surgical procedures that he was going to be doing, which one of them, I told him, was a friend of our family who had that blue baby syndrome. That's what Denton Cooley was famous for. He was at the first blue baby operation assisting up at Johns Hopkins. Story there, but that's about Denton Cooley. But at any rate, the people I was around and met, Denton Cooley was just, again, like Darrell Royal. Wherever I've been, I've gotten to meet, this is a story of my life, is the people who are just next to me. And for whatever reason, I believe I'm an easy person to be around, but I appreciate the skills that you and other people have. I don't have them. I don't have to. If you're on my team and I get to utilize your skills, just like today, then I just say thank you for doing this. You were doing again. The predicate of this is you're helping me with my progeny, my my daughter-in-law, my children, grandchildren, and future generations are going to benefit from this, knowing that this is going to be in Waco, Texas, at that institute there, housed in Waco, where probably already 30 members of our family have gone. So this even connects up with where this will be. So
Well,
another
that's
thing
nice of you to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Another point that you've led me to think about was health and what's come along. And I've been in healthcare and been lucky to be around some of the best physicians and dentists in the country, certainly in America. And I've met them and gotten to know them. And I have seen by studying genealogy, I have seen the diseases that run through our family and genetics. My father died at 45 of heart disease. And studying genealogy, you look at death records and death certificates, and heart disease, cancer are in most families, but certainly in ours, it wiped out my father. I mean, my uncles, his 6 brothers, all died of heart disease, and they were lucky to get to the 50s, and one made it into the 60s. But again, heart disease, and then my mother with cancer. So I learned about MD Anderson. I have heart disease and diabetes. So I use technology to control blood sugar, and I run on a pacemaker defibrillator right here in my chest. And thanks to the Texas Heart Institute that Dr. Cooley founded, that I've taken advantage of technology, but I have watched and read lots of death certificates because the death certificate also gives their mother and father's maiden name and who signed the death certificate. And along in that direction too, I will tell you that I found our dentist, Weldon Rogers, actually was in my ancestry line. And I've wondered, my parents are gone. I never knew that I don't even know if they knew we were related. But we tend to, if I like someone, I think somewhere our genes are connected somewhere. That's happened over and over again, that I think, I'll just say, I think God has a sense of humor and a plan and puts people in our lives. So I've always looked at, if I really like someone, I like to do their genealogy, because in high school, some good friends, I found that we were related. I mean, distantly, but we found relation. I found close connection between classmates who didn't know that their great aunts were sisters. So that's made genealogy fun and practical and useful more to just my own family. But with health, we're talking about health, was that, yes, health has been, I think, again, that's been put there for a reason, that it's led me to knowing a lot of really great people. And it's led me, by the way, too, to, well, I can get off on this, but just even last night I was watching the Kennedy assassination, and we've talked about even Dan Rather, going back to radio and TV and your company, and Dan Rather going to a Houston high school and standing out there in the water for Hurricane Carla. So that goes back to my growing up as well. That's what I could remember from television.
Yes, and let's explain that. No one had seen radar before on television. And Dan Rather was, you quite accurately say, standing in the water. They dragged a television camera up to the radar scope. Live, he narrated the picture of the storm coming in on land, and it was an absolute sensation. No one had ever, the public had never seen radar, let alone of the storm just off the coast or as it came in, battling their city. It was a high water mark, no pun intended.
Well,
did you ever see that? Did you see that?
I actually saw, yes, and I knew who Dan Rather was, and I thought, you are crazy to be standing out in that water. I mean, lightning, the wind, whatever.
Electrical equipment. He's standing in the water with all this power near him.
Yes, yes. Sometimes you have to do that, and again, that certainly made him in Houston. You have to, in life, you got to take a chance, right? That can pay off. And I've just been lucky. I haven't had to do too many dangerous things. I think riding on a tractor was a dangerous thing, but it cost me my right thumb. But still, you got to take a chance in life. My chances were to meet significant people, and people, aren't they? They're just, people are people. And again, people like to have friends and people they're comfortable with, can sit down, not like this. I mean, with technology, you and I, because believe me, I will get to Austin, Texas, to Lake Travis, and we're going to meet face to face, not with Facebook or with Zoom. We're going to meet face to face, and I'm going to take you to dinner to any restaurant you want to go to, and we're going to really talk, and we're going to eat. We're going to break bread together. I can tell you that's in both our futures.
Well, I look forward to that. And there's nothing like personal communication done personally, but this is as close as we can get at the moment. But I think it's a historical record that you're creating here, which will be very valuable. Would you like to talk about your faith?
Surely. I have, first of all, I'm a sinner. Nobody can top me. I tell people I've made some good decisions, but I've also made plenty of mistakes. I tell people that's why I'm smart. I think you learn from your errors, but my faith came from my mother and father, and a younger brother who has truly, he's read every word of the Bible twice. That means every single word of the Bible. He's my investor and my Bible counselor, and the two finest Christian men I know in the world are my younger brother and my son. And I still continue to learn from them. But again, at my church, when I was sewing the Houston Chronicle on Sunday morning, getting up early, I went for 2 years without ever missing a day of Sunday school. And that's, again, the significant people were the families that really supported our church. I went to Broadway Church. The Broadway plan is how churches finance their buildings through bonds. And that started with a judge there in Harrisburg, and churches are built because of that. And I have children who are missionaries and who are in planting churches around the world. So I am surrounded by, and have been, by these significant people who walk the talk and taught me some valuable lessons. But again, some of whom, you know, I broke. I am being human and all, but I learned from them. I'd say making some mistakes that you recognize and learn from has been, again, another aspect of my life. So I acknowledge those, but today I have is one of my goals in life is to read the Bible more and to understand there truly is a plan. And if in my life I look back on it, it's faith, because my mother taught me to her dying day these stories about the Bible. Being a poor family, faith is what got them through life during tough times. And I will never forget that when she was dying, the doctor came in, and my younger brother and I were there with our mother, and my brother was saying there is a thin line between prolonging living and prolonging dying with cancer. And it was at the stage where any treatment would be prolonging dying with my mother. And my younger brother literally got this doctor by the arm and said, "Do not let our mother keep going through this." And this doctor said, "Your mother is in a coma and does not know what's going on. She is incoherent." He walked out of the room. My brother, younger brother, who has tremendous faith, said, "Mother, we want you to know that we know you know what's going on." My mother had not opened her eyes in weeks. She opened her eyes and said, "I am not incoherent." My mother didn't know the word incoherent. If someone told me that story, I'd be saying, "Are you telling is that a real story?" I can tell you every word of that is the story. And I mean, I left the room after that and, of course, cried. And so that was my younger brother when he said, "Mother, we believe you know what's going on." But when she opened her eyes, so let me finish that story. My mother, I did go home. My brother would not leave my mother's side. He stayed there for a week. He needed to go take a shower, change clothes. I went home because he didn't have children at that time, but I did, and I needed to see my children, her only grandchildren. So I went home, changed clothes, took a bath, and I got pictures of her only grandchildren and took them back to her. So I went back to my mother. There was a nurse in the room. I said, "Mother, I want you to open your eyes and look at your grandchildren." I almost cry when I tell this story. But she opened her eyes and looked at those pictures. Well, this broke me up. I walked out of the room down the hall to cry, and the nurse opened the door and said, "Your mother has quit breathing." So there's that time in life when I think you have control over that. It's in the timing, and that was her time. And what was it? Because we had told her, "Mother, you have done your job. Go on. You've done your job on earth." So what was it that would allow her to go on? Looking at those pictures was the last thing she did on earth. So that's part of my faith as I've experienced it. Had great role models of ministers. I could just go on, and then children who followed in the ministry.
Let me say, there is clinical evidence that when someone leaves the room, sometimes people then feel like they no longer have to entertain them, or they don't have to pay attention any longer, and it's time to go. What do you think what was the moral of that story? What was the what do you take from that in a broader context of that passing of your mother? What happened?
Well, at her funeral, it reminded me of the love versus now abides faith, hope, and charity. Charity being love. That faith that it was God's plan, and I was watching it. You know, I've watched it just in my own life, and with my mother is watching and certainly she had known me my entire life. I'd only met her when she was still I still say a very young woman, having children, but she had faith, and I was watching it in front of me. And I think the moral was keep up your faith to the last breath, and take a chance, but live your life to the very end, and love to the end. That again, it was you just taught me another lesson. I still love to learn at 80, and you just told me clinical study. I believe that there is evidence that I put mine into that personal experience that says that I learned, my mother taught me a valuable lesson to her last breath. That was that, and give people a chance all the way through. And I will tell you, I had another good friend who was a student of mine, and he had a stroke. He was in a coma, and I went to visit him, and I go into a cold room. He's in a bed. There is no one in the room. I'm in the room with essentially a body. It was actually a scary situation. And with the experience with my mother, I walked up to him. His name was Don. I said, Don, I know you know I'm here. I am Les Fullerton, and I am here to visit with you. And I want you to know that you know I'm here. Well, there was certainly no response. He was in a coma. And but I give my mother credit for that experience with her, to follow through on that, to use it again. If you learn something, then use it. And I was able to do that. And that was a blessing to me.
How old was she when she died? And how old was your father?
My father was 45 and my mother was 52. So they were young people. So my children are older than my parents. And I never had the experience in our family of almost grandchildren. My mother had a few years of having grandchildren. My father never had grandchildren. And I've never known what it was like to have an 80-year-old in the family. So my two brothers and I, these are moral victories too. My younger brother is 79, and we're waiting. The three boys getting to 80 is really a moral victory, even into the 70s, because we did not experience that. And we all have grandchildren that we didn't know. I didn't know from my family how to be a grandparent. Never experienced it. So this has been great. I hope I can make it to great grandchildren.
Often, children are fascinated by what their parents say. Let's talk about your son, for example. They're fascinated what their parents say about what they were like when they were small children, and their children like to hear what mom and dad were like when they were small children. So let me ask you, what was your son like when he was growing up?
He was a dutiful. My son is the youngest. He had two older sisters. Yes. Who wouldn't let him eat a meal without saying, quit smacking, So he was almost the dutiful son, but he was to this day straight on guy. As I said, he's he and my younger brother are the two finest Christian men I know in the world. But he is smart, just did things right. He was a bear trainer there at Baylor in Waco, and they brought the Baylor bear home. But he is, again, truly smarter than I am. He won't accept that. But watching him grow up was having to deal with two older sisters. We never had a sister in the family. We just had our poor mother being around all of these males. So with my son, he had such a different upbringing with these two older sisters, but they really respect him and look up to him to this day because he is really the Dr. Fullerton in our family. I go to Conroe, Texas, watching his daughter perform, and I hear someone say, Dr. Fullerton, and I turn around. Well, they don't know me from Adam. They're talking to my son. So it's been a lot of fun to have him. He is a better student than I was. He won't accept that, but it's the truth. I know that. But he is one man. By the way, too, he has lost two children. I've lost three grandchildren. So in life, I've been lost parents young, and I've lost three grandchildren. And their testimony, which they have been asked to do in church, is to talk about that because my son's family picture is 4 chairs. 2 of them are empty. They're the 2 children he has lost. And then my daughter, son-in-law, they're missionaries. They lost a baby as well that they had already named after the sister. So life is just amazing. But I think, again, I really think that through faith, we've learned to accept the tragedies, what appear to be tragedies, you learn from, and life goes on. And I think that's what my mother and father taught me, that life goes on. Losing a father, the leader of our family, at 50, no, at him at 45, I was in my second year in dental school, a very challenging year, and to lose him in January with hearing my mother scream. I was at home, and he died of a massive heart attack. And that was a very insecure time. No money, being in school, no real job, and a mother who wasn't educated and would need to work to support, help support the family. So I've been through the best and the worst of time, but you learn and they all work to making a really a challenging but a rewarding life. And I don't, again, back off of the tough times either. So
it's all one package.
Yes, it is. And it's wonderful. And
Let me ask you, if you could come up with one word or a short sentence to describe your son's personality and his sister's personalities. I'm sure they were different people. What would they be?
Loving, responsible, passionate people.
That sounds great.
Mothers, they're wonderful mothers and fathers. And my daughter is looking forward already. I said, we redid their house, and there's a little room next to a bedroom. I said, Meredith, what is this room for you have here? She said, Dad, we're going to put the bassinet in there. So my daughter is already looking forward to becoming a grandmother. Her home is already ready to allowing her children to have new children come into the family. So that's a new experience too, is your children becoming grandparents. That will be a new experience. If I can make it there, it's like, I've never had any experience with this. So Life
I
is,
understand. Yes, life goes on, and it's out of your frame of reference. So it's a new frontier for you as well.
it is, it is.
Is there anything else we'd like to say as we sort of get to wrap things up here? It's something you might have forgotten. Biggest challenge in your life, or greatest accomplishments in your life, or biggest disappointments?
Well, it's the hardest thing is to talk about uh, personal accomplishment, family accomplishment, to develop a family and to take care of them and to be meaningful still, I believe, in their lives and their children's lives is, to me, the accomplishment that my, that's just based on pure number of years. But my parents didn't get to do that and to have that sense about life. Again, the full scope of life you can enjoy. Certainly, we're all proud of our children, and that could bore people. And I've been on both sides of that. The I think again, just being proud of what they already have become and that they're adults. And then my grandchildren, what they're doing too, two of them being Army and serving the country. My son and I were both in the Navy Dental Corps, and we both were with the Marines and then aboard ship. And he didn't follow me. He did that on his own. He just did it, to me, in a better way than I did, a more complete way. He's got a great little presentation on his tour crossing the equator on a ship. They do a little ceremony, and he's got that down. He's got it documented much better than I do. He uses technology. But then I guess in terms of even personal accomplishments is looking at, my parents didn't get to do anything. They couldn't play sports. They were doing jobs. They had to barely take care of themselves. And here I was being able to really throw a paper route, but also play sports. But academics and sports, of being versatile, to say that I was a quarterback because I had good legs, and I just had a sense about where to go with the football, and defense, where the ball was going to go. So I was a better linebacker than a quarterback. But then it came down. I didn't work for this, but I received an award as the top scholastic athlete in Houston in 1958. I might have already said that. That led me to Darrell Royal, to Scott Appleton. But that was a surprise because it was one of the first years they ever did this. And then that led to a yearly award that they give through our touchdown club here in Houston. My wife and I do a yearly luncheon for all the veterans in our school, and that's led to many stories. I have other stories I could tell you about connecting with people. Connections is a key word in my life story. It's, again, being connected to such good people. Could I tell you just one? You could edit this, but I want you to hear this one. I've been told not to put it into print until I am through with dentistry, because it involves the admissions committee at our dental school. That I've worked on that since 1969. I don't think there's anyone in the world who's interviewed more applicants to dental school or read more applications than I have, but it's because of the number of years. But it's been my passion in life to find good people for our profession. They've got to be good people before it's academics. They've got to have the right values. They got to care about people and be willing to take care of people. That's who I will support. Well, I had and I'm known for that in Texas. So I have people who will, applicants that someone will refer them to me, and I will talk to them and meet with them. Well, I had a young lieutenant in the Army. I won't mention names, but he was an Army lieutenant. This was his third time to apply to dental school. And his commanding officer told him that they don't want you in dental school. And I'm going to send you back for your third time to Afghanistan. This was an Army lieutenant who was an ordnance officer. So I could hear a baby crying. He and his wife had just had their first little boy. And I could hear that baby crying in the background. Well, for some reason, I think it was God talking to me saying, help this young man. So I said, I want you to come to the dental school, wear your military uniform that you wear for military funerals. Those Army uniforms are they're impressive. And I said, I want you to wear that to the luncheon. I said, you will stand out. I said, there will be members of the admissions committee who will be in there. And I said, I want you to meet a helicopter pilot. I almost crack up and cry about this. But I said, I want you to meet a warrant officer who is in the second year class, and he flew a helicopter. And I knew that he flew Condoleezza Rice and Donald Rumsfeld over in Seoul, Korea. And then they sent him to Baghdad. The helicopter pilot flew into the forward operating base, Baghdad, landed on a sand landing pad. An artillery shell landed in the sand next to his helicopter, but did not go off. It would have blown up the helicopter. They called a ordnance officer out of Baghdad to come defuse that artillery shell. The helicopter pilot is sitting in my luncheon on the row behind me, talking. They sat next to each other. Sitting next to each other is this lieutenant, the ordnance officer who defused the artillery shell, and the helicopter pilot are sitting next to each other. And I hear the words, you were the helicopter pilot? You were the ordnance officer? So that's what I heard. They met there. And then the helicopter pilot, the second year student, took the lieutenant around the school, introduced him. But this was getting late in the admission cycle. So we didn't have many places left. And I'm going, I have got to get this done. I like to get the ball across the goal line. I like results. I like talking to you today to get this done. Later on, I had a young man from Dallas. He was a split end for Ole Miss. He's from Fort Worth. And he called me. I got him accepted. This is why I can't talk about this, write about it in the Texas Dental Journal till I'm off the admissions committee. But he was accepted to our dental school, but he called me and said, Dr. Fullerton, he said, my mother has cancer and I need to be with her in Fort Worth and go to the dental school in Dallas because I've been accepted there as well. I said, listen, go to that dental school. This is God working again. I said, go to that school. It's okay. I said, here's the story. I need your position for an Army lieutenant who needs to come to our school, and I need your position. So that's the story I'm going to tell you. So go to Dallas, go to dental school. This was one fine Christian young man who they were happy to have, lucky to have go to their dental school. So I go back to the school and I say, we have a position open, this lieutenant, that we can give preference to a veteran. By the way, all things being considered equally, we can give preference to a veteran. I said, this is a veteran. One of the executive members of the committee loved Corvettes. This lieutenant redid Corvettes, and they talked about it. That was the connection between the two of them. They talked over the phone about Corvettes. And he worked, and he was on that committee, said, let's accept him. So he comes to dental school. He then goes on a mission trip to Guatemala. And a dentist in Fort Worth and Dallas takes dental students from all three schools, puts them as a team to work together as a team of working on helping on this mission trip. This young lieutenant and the student, I call him the split end from Ole Miss, are both on this mission trip and are put on the same team. And they're talking and they meet each other and said, you're a lieutenant? He said, you're the split end? He says, I got your position. And they are meeting in Guatemala on a mission trip. And they're saying, do you know Dr. Fullerton? They said, yes. And they gave that at the end of the mission trip, you give your testimony. What did you get out of this mission trip? They gave their testimony as how they got into dentistry. Each of them got into dentistry. Isn't that a great story? That's the best
story. Terrific story.
It is so intertwined with really three people, the helicopter pilot, the ordnance officer, and I'll go further. So this lieutenant had two more boys while he was in dental school. So they have three boys, and his wife is pregnant with a fourth child when he graduates. And they want to take my wife and me. My wife is such a key part of this. This is a partnership. Together, I mean, individually, okay. But as a partnership, you will meet and I will meet your wife, you will meet my wife, and we're going to have dinner together if it's okay with you. And
yes, yeah.
But they brought me a gift. It was an artillery shell. It wasn't the shell, but he had it in I could bring it with me, but if the police stopped me and I have an artillery shell in my car, I had to think, can I get home with this from the restaurant, home with an artillery shell? But his brother got the artillery shell for him, but he had it in a, what do you call it, a box,
shadow box, perhaps a shadow box.
Shadow box. I couldn't think of it. That's my 80-year-old, but I couldn't think of flower box. So he gave it was well done, and that to me is one of the best gifts I've ever been given. But isn't that a great story? I hope that
you're a great storyteller.
Well, it's the right story, and it is. Every word is the truth, and it's why. I mean, it sums up why I've had a wonderful life. And people say, "Are you over speaking?" I am not over speaking to say how fortunate I have been to be in the places, and to top it off, to be here today is just a continuation of that story.
Well, I want to thank you for being here with me
Thank
and sharing this with your family and the family to come. I think they'll value this conversation that we've had. And once again, is there anything else that you would like to add as we close out?
No, just that. Thank you again. This is icing on the cake here,
Okay.
and
Uh,
I want more cake and more icing too. But that's the dessert I'm going to buy. It ought to be cake with icing and said, "You get the icing you want."
I thought of something. So let's talk about your wife some.
Yes.
How you met, what it was about her, and talk to me about the life that you've led together.
Well, first of all, I've had 2 wives. No man. That's a part of God looking after me. A part of saying, can you still make the most of a situation where I'm the cause and to pay the price? But God has been so good to me to put 2 wonderful women in my life, and I to have again a second chance was with my wife that really has been my career in dentistry. And what my wife, I'll just say, I say my first and last wives instead of saying second wife. I never want to refer to my wife as my second wife, but I met her. I actually did surgery on Trisha, and she said I hurt her, and did surgery, and I said, honey, I never hurt anybody. She said, well, you hurt me. And her mother was sitting in the same room, and she said her mother was cringing. They did not like dentists. They were afraid of dentists. So my wife said, you hurt me. And I thought to myself, I'm going to marry him and make him pay for it the rest of his life. So that's her story. She tells it. Well, I'll let her tell that to you personally. I'll say, honey, please, tell you the story of my life. I said, Brian would like to hear this story. I told it to him, but it's better when you say it with the emotions you put in it, because she has expressions. But I met her through initially her family. Her father was a surgeon, chief of staff at the hospital where I did surgery. And once I met her, I have to tell you, I was in love. It was truly love at first sight, and I couldn't resist her. And it was, she was she's beautiful inside and out. And then she assisted me while surgically. So she knew what I did. She knew how well I took care of people and how well I took care of my staff, the people who worked with me. Once again, being so fortunate. People talking about having employee problems, staffing problems, not this guy. I mean, I had the best of the best, and they appreciated how we, again, as an office, took care of people. But Tricia, then, everyone who meets her, when you meet her, you'll forget me. The dental students love her. She is the Alumni Association. She just volunteered, did all the work for me, helped me get on this program today. She is a doer, but she is a beautiful woman, has the prettiest eyes of any human being I've ever seen. And she doesn't think anything of herself. She doesn't think she's smart. She is so streetwise, it's scary. But our alumni association, the board, loved her and just said, "You've got to be our executive director." So Tricia and I have worked in dentistry all these years. And I think she's the most beloved female in dentistry. All the other dental schools want to have her, and being my wife, they can't have her, so our school gets her. But
Well, it sounds like a blessing.
she is a blessing, and once you meet her, you'll also know I'm not over speaking there. She is so good to be around and interacts with people so well. In her family, she is the middle of 5 children. She's the cheerleader in the family. Her mother and father she was the peacemaker in her family. And she has an interesting story herself. I did her genealogy. So it goes back to the founding of Texas, the Canary Islanders who founded San Antonio. It's a story in itself. But she is my partner in life and professional partner for now 42 years. And she says it seemed more like 50, but it's only 42. Only.
Could we have a timeline of things so we have a sort of a complete sense of everything? So we covered your mother and your father growing up in Houston, and then working on the docks. And then working for the companies administrating the shipping activities. Correct?
Yeah.
And then we moved into football UT. How many years did you play there?
2 years.
And what were those years? Do you remember?
59 and 60.
Okay. And then you went on to dental school.
In 61, I entered dental school.
Okay. And then you enlisted and you were with the military?
1965 to 67, I was in the U.S. Navy Dental Corps.
And then what came after that?
I specialized at Baylor Dental School was in Dallas, so I spent 2 years in Dallas, and then came to Houston in 67, 65 to 67 was the Navy Dental Corps, and then 67 to 69 in Dallas specializing, and then 69 to now in Houston.
Okay, specializing in what?
In periodontics. I did gum surgery, which leads back to I have to tell you, the first word I ever saw in dental school was this word Gingiva. It was a funny looking word. I pronounced it gingiva. The fella sitting next to me in my class, George French, said, "It's gingiva." I said, "Okay, I said, "What is gingiva?" Gingivitis was never known when I grew up or went to dental school. He said, "It's the gums." Well, as it was, gingiva was the most, I probably dealt with, cut on, treated more gingiva than any other human being around. So I always told my students, notice the first word you notice in dental school. It may be a key to the rest of your life. So I went back to specializing in periodontics. So I was a periodontist. So I started my practice there in the East End where I grew up in Houston, 69. And I've been there ever since. I taught part-time at the dental school, but was in full-time practice. I didn't have time to teach because I was truly overrun with patients. I was the only periodontist in half of Houston. There were only 4 when I went into practice. If you couldn't do well at that time, you had a problem.
How big did your practice become?
Well, as long as I could, I did probably 6 to 7 hours of surgery a day, 5 days a week. I did by going to to the lake, to Lake Conroe, where I taught my kids to ski, and going up to a farm where I got a hold of a tractor that got a hold of my right thumb, kept me from doing surgery anymore. But
When did that happen then?
that happened in 1984, I think it was 1984 or 85. One of those, 84 or 85 was when I hurt my thumb. It was a small but devastating injury, but I tried to let that help other people. That dentists put their hands where they don't belong. And I did that on a tractor. And boy, I tell you, I lost 6 months of my life in pain. Only cancer could have really caused more pain than that, because that was a miserable time. But again, I literally had to ask my wife to leave the house so I could scream. I was in that much pain. I was in pain uh, two out of every 3 hours for 3 to 4 months of my life. And all they could do was take pain medication, which would take an hour to work. It worked for an hour, and then I could be out of pain for an hour. So
There are so many nerve endings in the hand. It's
thumb has more nerve endings. That's a picture of my little short.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
this is my favorite thumb. This used to be my favorite, but I can't grab a football with, that I can grab a hammer, whatever, but being numb, this thumb is numb. This part of the thumb came from here. They did a graft over here, so there's no feeling in this, but they closed it up. Once they closed it up, life was good. No more pain. Once it healed, I can shake hands with people, pet people, hold their shoulders, whatever. So,
Do you have that phantom limb syndrome where you imagine it being there, or?
no, it's just that I still play with it. When it gets cold, there are no fibers to keep it gets very cold. So hunting was almost out for me too. I was a duck and goose hunter, so I didn't put down the stories about laying in the rice fields and dodging the water moccasins and having some good hunting trips. So I'm about ready to give my grandson my shotgun. One grandson fixed it up, but he has a shotgun, but he cleaned it up for me, and it's ready to be given as a gift to my son's son. So I want to pass that along to a Fullerton. So it's one of the only things I really can pass along to them that they can hold and touch.
It will live long after you
Yeah.
are gone.
Yes.
And let's so after the thumb incident changed your direction, I guess, focus. What was that new focus?
Well, I went actually into consulting. People had known that I had a wonderful practice, I had a staff of 16. If you go into most dental offices, there are not that many. Some practices today are bigger, but I had a staff of 16 wonderful women, females, all to serve our patients. And then I had 10 operatories. Most people had from 2 to 3, 4 at the most operatory. I had 10 operatories because I had 3 hygienists to take care of all the patients I took care of. I needed hygienists because the periodic cleanings that you get were preventive in nature. So we had a lot of people to take care of, but we didn't talk about this. Who are your patients? So I took care of some significant people. One of the greatest people was Gene Kranz, the flight director at NASA. One of the most honorable people I've ever met. His book is Failure is Not an Option after he got Apollo 13 back to Earth. What a great man he is. He's spoken for our alumni association, but he wrote me a note that I cannot find. But he didn't say one word about me. He wrote about what a great team you have in your office. And that's really what I was known for, was the people who surrounded me. It looks like my team. Another award I got was the Texas Dentist of the Year in 1993. I was knocked to my knees and didn't see that one coming. But
Some other patients that you
it only means that I am surrounded and have been surrounded by really great people. I noticed you just went off the screen. Did we run out of time? Trish?